Ayes have it. Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Harbour Subcommittee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our council's website. Members may notice that when calling members to speak, I will refer them formally and using their title, e.g. Councillor Smith, so that we are clear on who the councillors are talking, and by process of elimination, who are officers. Remote participants, please follow good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video when you're not addressing the meeting, writing speak in the Teams chat function when you want to contribute. If you're in the hall, you can do this when you're, well, just by hand. Please don't repeat contributions already made by other members. No material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended as part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you rejoin the meeting so we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly into the mic, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. When referring to reports, please provide reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone to follow. Please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. And members, I'll take us on to item number 1, which is our settlement apologies and Chair's approval of the members' remote participation, which I approve of. Claire, can you take us through this?
Okay, yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. We've got apologies from Councillor Hagman this morning. There are 6 members present, 3 here at County Buildings at Wigton, being yourself and Councillors Beretti and Dashper. We've got 3 members present on Teams, being Brodie, Ingalls and Stitch. 1 member currently not present, being Councillor Johnston, and I should say that Councillor Beretti is here substituting for Councillor Hagman. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. We've had Councillor Beretti with us before and he brought a lot of contribution last time, so let's hope he matches up again. Members, on to item number 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations or statements of correction they would wish to make? No, nothing. So members, moving on to Harbour Matters, financial position and current and proposed capital works report by the Assistant Director, Transport and Infrastructure. Apologise, Stuart Cavan are here to assist me if members have questions. Have you got anything to add, officers, before I go to members?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from members? Councillor Brodie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm almost as croaky as you, so I'll make it brief. Yeah, looking at the figures on page 8, 2 tables there, income and expenditure. I think if we were a business, we'd be bust because we're running at £120,000 deficit, and other community and run harbours that run by the communities have got a duty to break even. What more can we do? What more can we do to make our business more sustainable and be less reliant on council taxpayers? That's my first question. Second one is looking at the figures for Isle of Whithorn. It's a small harbour like Galveston and Port William, but the running costs are £22,000 compared with £4,000 and £8,000 in Galveston and Port William. But the income is similar. Only 4,000 income compared with 5,000 income at Galveston and Port William. Why is it costing so much more at Isle of Whithorn compared with those other two harbours?
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. The voice hasn't been the same since last Thursday, unfortunately, but I'll open that to Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie and Chair. The expenditure allocated against Isle of Whithorn is due to our member of staff that there is a member of staff that covers those 3 harbours. His wages allocated against one harbour, not the others, which provides that immediate discrepancy. And what we don't do is balance it out across the 3 harbours. So that's why it jumps that figure up. In relation to, is there anything more we can do to reduce the deficit, I think was the first question. The deficit when we came in 2 years ago was about £235,000. We've reduced that to £120,000. So we have made significant progress in that with both income and expenditure measures. We will continue to look at doing that, but it's increasingly harder to do that. And normally the only way to reduce the deficit is to increase the charges. So, and that's a decision that this committee can recommend and full council can then approve, but we can bring various recommendations on how to do that. But there's very little areas where we can reduce expenditure now. And later in the papers, we will discuss certain measures to do that, particularly at these Macca's Harbours, but there are increasingly fewer areas where we can reduce expenditure, and we may need to increase income if we're going to reduce the deficit.
That's for that, Paul. Well, one question that comes from that, Paul, maybe is the harbour master in the Macca's, is it he or she divided between the three equally in their time, or do they have one that they're particularly at? Or?
No, their time is divided equally in a safety role for inspecting and checking for defects at the harbours and reporting that. And it's equally measured between all three harbours. It's just that the funding for that is allocated against one in particular.
Maybe for clarity in the future, is it worth maybe putting that over the three harbours, or is that something that would skew your finances, your accounts?
It would just need a change in the way it's budgeted and measured in finance. We could remove it completely and put it against the general harbours management, but then that would skew the actual running costs for the harbours, if you like. But we may need to find a financial mechanism to put it across the three, and then it would even it out.
That would be good just to make it clear for everyone. Are you happy with the response, Councillor Brodie?
Yeah, I think if the figures were allocated to the three harbours equally, it would give you a better picture of where the three harbours, how the three harbours are doing. Because the moment you're reading the papers would say, well, I would ask the question to ask. And the only option is said, I do agree that we are moving towards a more sustainable place, but still not ideal. At one stage, we talked about community transfer of harbours to local communities who wanted to run the harbour. Have we done any work on that lately? Because we talked about it a number of years ago.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Paul?
All I'd say is I would note that these are revenue figures. The capital figures and the capital liability of the harbours is quite significant, and I think these harbours came under the full council control because the local communities couldn't afford to run them a few decades ago. So I think we very carefully have to look at the full financial picture before that was considered, but it hasn't been considered in the last couple of years that I'm aware of.
Thanks for that, Paul. Do we have any other members? Councillor Peretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Page 9, page 17, where it refers to the charges for electricity usage. I know it says here that there may be a change every 6 months, and how reactive are you to the market changes in electricity costs? Plus, the other thing is it doesn't, or I would like to know, do you actually have, or do we have a standing charge cost at all of these different places? And although the figures there are clear, do we have a figure of what the actual consumption is at all of these harbours?
Paul?
Councillor Peretti, yes is the answer to all of those questions. The non-consumption charge is built into the kilowatt-hour charge we advertise. We we do not charge for profit. That is the actual at cost to the council cost for provision of electricity at those harbours. We have moved to a mechanism where we will update the charges once per annum on the 1st of July at the second quarter of the financial year, once we've had a quarter to calculate the non-consumption charges as they come in, because they're very complex to operate and to calculate. So we do have the exact consumption charge for each harbour. I have calculated them for next year. They will actually drop because from the 1st of July by approximately 4 pence a unit on average. And that is due to the non-consumption charges going down for this financial year and the supply charges going up slightly. So the figures that are advertised from October 2024 to the 30th of June 2025 are at the cost to the council, and then they will change from the 1st of July 2025 for 1 year, 1 calendar year, and I've literally recalculated them yesterday with the electrical department, and on average they'll drop by about 4 pence a unit per site.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Bray.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So we do have consumption figures for each of the harbours, because from my point of view, from my climate hat on here, one can calculate the carbon content of that electricity if we know what it is, and that then feeds into another question which I might have later on if I ever get back on the Harbour Subcommittee, is what are we going to do with renewable energy production at harbours?
Do you suggest we put solar panels on all of our buildings, Councillor Beretti?
Taking the chair's suggestion, that would be a good idea.
And battery storage. Do you have anything to add, Paul?
Did I answer all of your points that you raised, Councillor Beretti?
Yeah, no, I just wonder, could I see maybe where we get an oversight of the actual consumption use? So if, say, for instance, Stranraer Harbour, there were 150 kilowatts used, Garliston, there would be a lot less, I'm assuming, so there may be about 50 kilowatts. So it's just to give us an idea as to what is the traffic at the harbours.
I can provide that information. Would you like me to put it in the monthly report as an additional figure, or do you want it in a more formal manner in a paper?
I think if we just put that into the monthly report, Paul, I don't know if it needs to come to the committee every time, but if we've got that in the monthly report, then it means we can check that each month, and members can then take a look at how many panels they think we need. Now, Councillor Dashbar.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning. Page 10, this has just caught my eye. West Pier wood replacement for railings. It's the only one there which doesn't have a progress next to it. The box is blank. So what is the progress on the wood replacement?
Paul.
Thanks.
The engineers checked that 2 weeks ago, and they are going out to tender for that work to be done. The money is in the capital budget. It was planned for, and we're just in the process of getting that work moving.
Thank you. And page 14 goes on about our different costs and things, and there's a bit there about cruise ship tender charges at £31 a berthing. So how many cruise ships are we getting in the region, and is the service feeding into the cruise ship levy consultation? Thanks.
Oh.
We currently have not had a cruise ship visit Stranraer. We have had inquiries for cruise ships to visit Stranraer, and next week I'm working with the Department for Trade to get Stranraer registered as an international port so cruise ships can land international passengers at Stranraer. We have not formally put any response into the cruise ship levy consultation.
Is that something that you would like to look at, Councillor Dashbar?
Well, through you, Chair. My understanding was that it was the Chair's responsibility to look at surveys and make sure that the committee does have a response for things like this. So I do feel it's important for Stranraer. I don't know what the cut-off date, if we've missed it or not, but if we could maybe get a formal response for that, I think that would be good.
Do you know the cut-off date, Paul?
Not off the top of my head, I'm afraid. I'd have to look it up.
No problem. Because, so Paul and I have discussed this and the idea of cruise ships coming to Stranraer, and there's hope for one coming soon. So it might be worth us taking a look at this survey. Can we get that sooner rather than later, please, Paul? And if we send it to all members of the Harbour Subcommittee so that they can see what the questions are and can feed into that process. Have we got any more questions, members? I don't have any more questions. I'm going to ask briefly for a brief overview of what's happened at the knuckle end in the Stranraer Marina, just so that members have got that knowledge.
Chair, as part of the engineering design for the new Stranraer Marina concept, an engineering survey was done for the whole area, and that flagged up that the sheet piling at the north end of the West Pier is aged, as is some of the piling supporting some of the pier which has a concrete surface. This was flagged to our engineering team. We put a precaution for vehicles going on it in the short term. Last week, the engineering team, 2 weeks ago, the engineering team went down and did a resurvey, or more detailed survey with specialists, and we have now reopened the pier to all access except heavy goods vehicles, because we want to unload the area near the sheet piling and the concrete plinth surface. That will remain in place in the short to medium term. There is no imminent risk of collapse or anything of that pier. The pier can still be used. Otherwise, it's just we need to keep the very heavy vehicles off the pier as a safety precaution until in the medium to longer term we can replace the sheet piling and the piling supporting the concrete plinth.
Thanks, Paul. And what the repairs to that knuckle end, we're looking to try and get that through the Borderlands expansion of the marina. Am I correct in saying that? And it won't necessarily be a capital project of the council.
I can't answer that question directly. There is a whole large package of work that would need to be required to put the marina in place. I'm not privy to where the exact funding comes from for each stream for each aspect of the package of work that would need to be done at Stranraer for the marina to be in place.
That's that, Paul. I see Karen's got her hand up looking to come in on that point. Karen?
Thanks very much, Chair, and through yourself. So I just thought it might be helpful for members for me to come in. So just to confirm, the decision of capital investment required for the knucklehead hasn't been confirmed yet. We're working through a process with the engineers in terms of costings associated with that work, and then we will work very closely with the Stranraer Marina project to intertwine that, but can't confirm at this moment in time if it's going to be part of that larger project or capital investment through our own capital investment programme. But we'll keep members updated as that progresses. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Karen. Members, I'll move on to Councillor Ingalls.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Mackers Harbours are very unlikely to ever cover costs. I think there needs to be a completely different vision or a different view of how we look at these harbours. They're vital to the local economy, the visitor economy in Isle of Wight, Garliston and Port William. That's not been developed, and it really needs to be looked at. I think it would be good to be in, the council to be in partnership with harbour users and community councils in these villages if they're still there. I believe Garliston's finished now, but there needs to be development of harbours. It's not a loss. If it's showing a deficit of 100,000, it's not a loss. It's an investment in those villages. If we just ignore them and don't invest in them, it's a disinvestment in the visitor economy in these villages. And I think we could maybe look at a broader vision for the harbours. How do we, work in partnership with the visitor economy, with our own visitor tourist officer. I think it's John King that deals with that sort of stuff at the council, to find a way to bring more people into these areas to use the harbours. I mean, William Harbour used to be a really busy harbour with visitors many, many years ago. It had a huge tote festival that ran out of there. And I think it's just a wee bit backward to look on them as being a burden to the council. You know, we really need to be looking at how we can invest in them and how we can do that with partners, not just as a council. I know we are strapped for cash, but you know, there's any God's amount of wind farm money out there that villages can tap into to invest in their harbours. And I think that broader conversation needs to be had, and it would be good if we as a Harbour Committee can start to instigate that connection, Chair.
I think you're right, Councillor Inglis. Our input in these harbours is an investment in the community, and we wouldn't want to see that go. And I think we want to reaffirm that. And I think you're correct that we should be looking at these more strategically in the tourism and visitor economy, as well as our marine economy. I would invite the officers in to talk to that if they've got anything to add, but I would also say is it may be worth us having a briefing, both as a harbour sub with economic development, to see if there's any scope or any projects that we could do to enhance these harbours and boost their numbers. But I'll pass over to officers.
Councillor Inglis and Chair, the one thing I would say is in the next part of the papers we've brought some recommendations forward for how, as a Harbours team, we can manage the harbours for the wider benefit of the community, and that's for your direct consideration now. But I would fully support any strategic input or consultation for boosting the harbours as a driver to boost the local community.
Thanks for that, Paul. Karen, is that hand a fresh hand or is that from previous?
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to come in and I guess echo what Paul has said there. You know, I would absolutely support, you know, the development of particularly the Markers Harbours going forward. You know, there are short-term measures in the papers in front of members. However, I think, you know, over the last 10 to 15 years, we've seen, you know, the positive steps with working collaboratively with our communities and that wider economic sort of development impact. So I definitely think, you know, that there is something that we as council officers could look to develop going forward in conjunction with Harbour Subcommittee to look at the future of particularly the three harbours in the Markers, but also the other two. So it's certainly something we could pick up and plan and develop going forward to ensure the real community assets within the heart of each communities. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Karen. But my one question on that is, how do we feed that back to the members of this committee and get members involved in this? Because we'll probably have ideas. We'll be with the communities. We'll have an idea of what they're looking for, or what we could provide, or find other funding, etc. I would like for members to be a part of that decision making and those discussions, just so that we can get a steer on this. I don't know if a briefing or a workshop would maybe be worthwhile between the Harbour Sub and the Harbours staff, as well as economic development, or even SOSE. I don't know if that was maybe a too big a round table, but that's the direction that I think we maybe need to go with here to try and invigorate these harbours and make them the assets. And I see Councillor Inglis wants to come in, and I'll bring you back in, Karen, to answer.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry, Karen, on you go.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Inglis. My apologies. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I think this needs to be, you know, a joint development, and absolutely members, you know, need to be part of that. Harbour Subcommittee need to be part of that. The wider communities, community councils, development trusts, etc., need to be part of that, as well as other organisations. I do feel that there's potentially a little bit of mapping to do from a council officer perspective in terms of what that looks like. But for me, it's, you know, what is our vision for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you know, for these assets to ensure that they're invigorated and really, you know, at the heart of their communities and allowing that sort of development within their own individual communities as well. You know, working with the local place plans, etc. You know, bringing in, as you say, socio-economic development. So I think there's a little bit of mapping to do there in terms of what that potentially looks like, and then everyone coming together, as you suggest, Chair, to I guess work out what the next steps would be in order to put those improvements and development plans in place. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Inglis.
That's what I can't.
Here's
Councillor
Ben
Inglis.
Carr. Yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. I think a good starting point is to discuss it with the communities and the harbour users, you know, and how we put that meeting together to sit down and say, look, we want to, this is where we are as a council, this is what it's costing, we need to look at how we redress this. So is there some way forward? And that engaging with the communities and the harbour users to do that, I think is a positive step, and it would probably be the first step I would suggest. But we certainly need, we can't look at harbours from a cost point of view only. It needs to be from the wider socio-economic point of view and how we involve them, the villages, to look after their own harbour and how they can bring money in to help the council. So I'm all for that, Karen. If we can take that forward as an action point and try and get it moving just as quickly as we possibly can, that would be great. Thank you.
Karen, you want to come back in, and then Paul?
Thanks, Chair. I didn't have anything to add there, but happy to take that forward as an action to develop the harbours. No problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Mr. Chair, can I suggest you've got your designated person here who's your marine specialist. He's at the meeting. May I suggest you ask for his counsel in how the Harbour Board or the Harbour Subcommittee can be set up and structured to improve business development, because he will see how other harbours have done this.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Paul, and give you a good idea. Willie, would you like to come in and address what Paul's just said there?
Well, thank you, Chair. Obviously, the answer is yes. I'm very happy to be approached. I work with a number of harbours of different types. I'm very happy to share my knowledge with you. So when you start the process, please invite me to join.
Thanks for that, Willie. Thanks for that. It could be quite exciting. Do we have any more questions, members? I'm not seeing any hands going up. So, members, I'll take us to the recommendations, which are, members are asked to note 1, the Harbours Revenue Financial Year to date outturn in relation to 2024 to 2025 budget, approved by the Communities Committee on the 2nd of April 2024, as detailed in section 4. Are we happy to note? I'm getting nods. 2, the expenditure in the relation to the Harbours Capital Plan for 2024-2025 financial year. Happy to note? I'm getting nods. 3, the 2025 to 2026 revenue budget approved by the Breeze and Galloway Council on the 27th of February 2025. Are we happy to note? I've got nobody going against those. 4, note the 2025 to 2026 capital expenditure plan approved by the Economy and Infrastructure Committee on the 15th of April 2025. I'm happy to note, yep. 5, the inflationary increase of 5% agreed at Enabling Customer Services Committee in the 11th of February 2025 will be applied to the schedule of fees and charges from the 1st of July 2025. Happy to note. Yes. So, members, moving on to item number 5, the Port Marine Safety Code Compliance Report by Assistant Director of Roads and Infrastructure. Members will note that an updated Appendix 1 was received and circulated on the 29th of May. Paul Jennings and Stuart Cavan are here to assist members if they have any questions. Do we have anything to add to the report, Chair? Paul, Stuart, do we have anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thank you. Members? Councillor Beretti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Right, Chair, looking at the contents on page 28 and going down the various headings, I notice that there isn't anything to do with environmental anything environmental. But looking at page 65, I see that environmental data and advice to be shared with others. So the word environmental it actually does get into the document, but it says there's a low priority and it's not started. So I've noticed that in other parts of the document where it says low, the word not started status is usually has gone with it. So what exactly is that environmental data? Because going forward, again with my climate hat on, we are going to have to look at talking about net zero and anything to do with trying to get energy reduction, but also biodiversity up.
Paul?
Yes, Councillor Bretty, that environmental data that's been referred to in the Port Marine Safety Code Report, section 7.1, that's environmental data such as in wind strength, wind direction, tide heights with harbour users. So it's quite common for harbours to take that data and then share it on an online platform so a harbour user can look on an app and see it live. We don't yet do that. We would provide it upon request over a radio or telephone. So that's what that's referring to. It's not referring to the long-term environmental factors affecting the environment.
Councillor Bray?
Yeah, so I know the word environmental has many connotations, but could we have another word that actually takes into account my environmental thinking?
Paul?
I would have to liaise with a designated person who is actually, that's his audit report, and that's the wording in his questioning. But I'm sure I can liaise with William and we can change that to maybe meteorological data.
Thank you. William, I see your hands up.
I was just going to offer a similar suggestion. The Port Marine Safety Code is quite prescriptive in how it uses the word environmental, but I think it would be clearer to councillors and officers if we perhaps said meteorological in that context. We'll look at rewording in future reports.
That's right, William. Have you got anything else, Councillor Brady?
Oh, yeah. Going back to what I said earlier about the things that you report on, is it likely that we're going to see more environmental information coming into a report? So harbours have got quite an impact, as Councillor Ingle said earlier, that if we wish to try and promote harbours, that is going to have positive but also detrimental effect on harbours, and that environmental and biological biodiversity is going to be impacted as well.
Paul?
As Harbour Master, it's my role to manage the safety of the harbours and also the conservancy, which is maintaining the infrastructure against any environmental impact. It's not the Harbour Master's specific role to look at the environmental impact of the harbour. That's where the Harbour Subcommittee, as the Harbour Board, in liaison with would normally consider the strategic direction of the harbour, and then the Harbour Master would implement that strategic direction. So if you're looking at a financial strategic direction and package and series of measures to enhance the harbours, you may want to look at the environmental at the same time. That's my suggestion. Again, your designated person would be able to advise you on the clarity of the direction of that from the strategic direction perspective.
Is it perhaps for a separate report to look at our climate footprint of the harbours? I've got Karen Brownlee putting her hand up.
Thank you, Chair, and through yourself. So I do feel there's a bigger piece of work here in terms of the council estate as a whole. In terms of environmental impact and you know what we can do to reduce emissions, etc., through solar panels or the likes. So my feeling at the moment is that harbours would come into that envelope as the wider council estate. I'm not aware that the specific harbours at this current time have been reviewed or considered but it's certainly something I can pick up with the property team as part of that wider development if members agree. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Councillor Brady.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I think as I'm kind of looking ahead to when the new climate subcommittee starts and we start to think about a lot of the other things, as you have just said there, how everything impacts on climate. But also I'm looking at Stuart and I'm thinking, right, okay, we increase the traffic to the ports and that's going to have an impact on roads. So all of those things maybe should be looked at, and I'm not saying we're going to be able to address every single issue, but we can at least say this is likely to be the result of what happens if. So, but I am looking forward, if there is a report coming to the new climate group in October, then that would be excellent, and I would love to see the Harbours group present something at some stage. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. I don't know if you were looking for an answer there. No, so we'll move on to Councillor Dashper.
Thank you. Page 64, Appendix 2, bottom box there goes on about our website. And I'm sure you'll be familiar with the conversations we had at the last Harbours business meeting around the website and how we had a great website and then the web team came in and redesigned it and it wasn't as great anymore. So where are we with that? Thanks.
Oh.
I'm happy to report that the vast majority of the improvements we have been made to reconfigure the website so that it is now how we would like it to be. So we've just got a few more to do, and that should be done imminently, but we've done most of the changing it back so that it's how we would like it to be fit for purpose for our users. So.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Dashper.
And from a sort of strategic point, Chair, could we maybe look into getting a response from the council into, well, what communication the web team have with officers and departments before they make changes? Is it an inclusive process, or is it just the web team doing things off their own back, really, and then we end up in this situation? Thanks, Chair.
That's probably for Karen. Karen's on the screen.
Thank you very much, Chair, through yourself. Thanks, Councillor Dashper. As members, will be aware, my understanding was there was a corporate decision to update the council's web page. I absolutely appreciate there has been some challenges in terms of the Harbours web page. Just to give you confidence, any changes that have happened over the last 18 months to 2 years have been in conjunction with services in line with the agreed approach to updating, as I say, the whole council website as a whole, and that will continue. I would also just echo Paul's comments in terms of Paul's been working directly with the comms team to reflect on the report that we've got in front of us and the discussions we had at the business meeting to where possible make those changes so that the web page itself is fit for purpose for the users of our public users. Thank you.
That's reassuring. Thanks, Karen. Thank you.
That's right, Councillor Dashper. Thanks for that, Karen. Is there anything else, Councillor Dashper, in your question?
No, I think that's my only one. You're off light today, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dashper. Members, you'll have seen in our appendices we've got strategic options for each harbour. Well, we go through those strategic options one by one, and I'll suggest that we start with Stranraer since the first that comes up. What do members think on this one? Or actually, will I invite Paul in to give us a slight briefing on the options that are in front of us? Paul?
Sorry. So Appendix 4, which was we've titled Stranraer, we didn't have any. We discussed and we believe that in general the harbour's running, the way that the harbour's being managed is fine, doesn't need too much strategic change. So we put the general title of the fees under that one, under the Stranraer paper. So there are 5 different options for us to work up a package for you to recommend at the next Harbour Subcommittee meeting about how we change the fees and charges for all the harbours for the next financial year. So, and that's what those 5 recommendations basically say. So, basically, it's for you to decide which one you would prefer, and then we will work up those options for the next financial year.
Thanks for that, Paul. So, members, have we got a suggestion? Councillor Ashburn.
Just a question, really. Page 71 on the Stranraer one. It says under EIII, a higher rate for inactive commercial vessels taking up quayside space. How many inactive vessels are we having?
Paul?
So the whole point of a harbour is generated income for the community. If you've, the general quayside fees are quite low, and we generate income by the vessel being active, and then we're charging the activity of the harbour, be it landing fees, could be passenger fees, could be anything else. So if there is a large vessel set on the quayside, it's essentially blocking a space for another active vessel to come in and boost the economy of the whole area. And therefore, and at Stranraer and Kirkcudbright, we have a couple of inactive vessels which blocks probably about 20% of your quayside immediately. Therefore, why are we charging them a small general annual quayside berth fee, and when it's not maximising the income and it's not maximising the potential for the community of that harbour? So therefore, if someone wants to berth the harbour, berth the boat there and do nothing with it, then they should be contributing as much as the others. So it's a way of generating, allowing the harbour to generate for the local community, and it's promoting active business in that harbour as well.
I suppose I was just wondering how many vessels, I mean, how often is this happening that we've got these inactive boats? Yeah.
Paul?
So at Kirkcudbright, a fisher vessel was deregistered and is awaiting sale, and it's been sat there a year now, so that's a berth. And at Stranraer, we've got a very large vessel there that's not commercial or leisure or anything. It's just sat there and it's blocking 1.5 spaces out of 6. So that's the sort of thing we're looking at, and they're paying a very small amount of money for blocking an awful lot of opportunity for other commercial users of those commercial quaysides.
Thank you, Paul. Do we have any suggestions then, members? Councillor Brady.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Clearly, I'm trying to catch up with things on this, Chair, and from what I've just heard, it seems like you've got a stranded assets in the sense of the actual key is a stranded asset because you've got a boat or a vessel holding that up. Have you thought about putting a much higher charge on that to encourage that person move the boat away? But as far as the actual fees are concerned, I'm quite happy from what I've seen. If we're going to go through appendix per appendix, I'm quite happy with appendix 4 on the fees.
So are you happy with the recommendation in option A, or would you like to discuss option E, which is as A but with some extras, which includes the higher rate for inactive commercial vehicles to take up quayside space?
I would say A, but I do think that the inactive commercial vehicles is something that has to be seriously taken seriously.
I would be inclined to say E, just because it tightens up our harbours and it tightens up our policy. And I think everyone in this committee has commented on inactive commercial vehicles and quite a lot of the things that are here. One question I would ask is, in A, do the waste charges remain separate from the general fee, Paul, or are they going to be included in that general fee?
Option A is just a general uplift of the existing schedule of fees and charges. So the waste charges are an existing fee within the schedule of fees and charges. So it would just be an uplift, and they would remain.
So members, what's our thoughts? Councillor Ashworth.
Just another question, Chair. What's the thinking behind the proposal for removing waste charges for commercial vessels under 13 metres? Just staff laddie question. Why 13? Is it? Yeah, thank you.
There's a tipping point in how much waste vessels land, and once you get above about that size, they start to land significant amount of waste, and therefore, disposal of waste is a significant cost to the Harbours service, and what's a significant cost to the whole community. Disposal of waste fits in with your environmental statement and desires, but yeah, so once you get to a 13-metre boat, it starts to become a very big commercial operation and lands significant amounts of waste. So there's a bit of a tipping point there.
Also, one of our issues is that all commercial vehicles, all commercial vessels are required to put their waste, no matter what kind of waste it is, in a licensed bin for commercial use. So it's not a case of taking it home or that, it has to go into a licensed bin, unfortunately. And I know through my own business how expensive that is. But Councillor Stitt.
If you're happy to move option E, I'm quite happy to second it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stitt. I'm comfortable with option E. Are other members comfortable? I'm getting nods. Yeah. So members, that'll get noted down. It's not an actual recommendation at the minute, but I'll move on to Port William strategy options for in Appendix 5. Do members have any questions on this one, or would you like to give us a wee briefing on this before we go to questions, Paul?
So we've got a series of recommendations for the operation of Port William. One involves the subject of dredging, which is a significant cost to that harbour each year. The average cost of dredging that harbour each year is between £6,000 and £7,000 when you average out licence fees, surveys, chemical sampling, and the actual cost of the dredging itself, if you average it out overall. There is also recommendations for how the harbour is used for the benefit of the whole community and the users. So that's the two options for Port William. As part of these options, we did consult with the Community Council, and their views are taken up in these recommendations.
Thanks for that, Paul. So members,
sorry, I forgot to say, on the dredging side of things, I've also liaised with the local lifeboat there, because obviously that affects them, and therefore the recommendation is based upon their view too.
Thanks for that, Paul. Councillors, any suggestions? Councillor Ingalls, you came on your video. Councillor Ingalls.
Yeah, I was at the door there. Sorry, I'm coming into this late, but the Port William one, when I'm looking at the dredging to budget for Inner Harbour every 5 years, the feedback I'm getting from people in the village, and not just the fishermen, is that 5 years is not going to be enough. Now, obviously, there's an element of confidence comes in here if you feel 5 years is enough, but it's going to impact on the fishermen in particular. So I'm not sure whether that's an appropriate amount of time to leave between dredging the Inner Harbour. What else? We've got the entrance area. After winter storms, commercial use charge for more frequent dredges if requested. Yeah, I would say that's probably acceptable. And then the item or option C, Inner Harbour every 3 years.
So your suggestion, Councillor Ingalls, is
yeah, sorry, I'm looking at item C, which says commercial users charge for more frequent dredges if requested. You know, I don't know whether that's putting a penalty on somebody simply because they're taking a fishing boat out in that harbour you know, it's not their fault that the harbour needs dredged. So yeah, so that my view is that 5 years is not enough for the inner harbour. The twice a year for the entrance would appear to be okay. Yeah, so that's where I'll go with that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that, Councillor Eccles. Paul, have you got anything to add to that?
I can operate whichever strategic option you would like. There's a series of recommendations here. One thing I would say is if a commercial operator wants to operate a deep draft vessel, they will be more limited at that harbour. Whereas if they operate a different business model of a shallower draft vessel, they will be less limited. So that they do have influence. They do know the circumstances at that harbour and the limitations.
Thanks for that, Paul. Maybe more to address the difference between the 3-year inner harbour dredging and the 5-year inner harbour dredging. What difference will that practically be for the users of the harbour?
You get a weed build-up in the back of the inner harbour and a small amount of general siltation from sand, which starts to limit the depth at the back of the harbour after about 3 to 5 years. I do know that we dredged it last year. It did not remove the smell, which people think that, oh, let's dredge it more frequently and get rid of the smell that is created by that. But we dredged it, and within a few weeks, the smell was back again. So, but it will not, dredging will not address the smell that is caused at that harbour. I can say that with quite some certainty. I don't know what will. It would need more, probably quite detailed scientific investigation if it can be addressed at all. So it's really how frequently you want to address the depth limitation at the back of the harbour, which is normally used by the leisure community, and it's very small draft boats that we normally placed in there as a result of that.
I think a question
Can I ask a question, Chair? Yeah. Paul, are the commercial fishing boats that are going out of Port William, are they larger now than they used to be, or are they pretty much the same as they've been in the past?
Paul?
I don't think the size of the boats changed in the last 10 to 15 years, but they're certainly bigger than the much longer historical view. And also Port William used to be a mirror harbour for Garliston, so if the weather wasn't good at Port William, they would land at Garliston and vice versa. But that habit is no longer in existence. So Port William, it's been developed to try and be an all-year-round, all-weather harbour, but it's always going to be facing the elements. So it depends how much you want to fight nature in that respect.
That's right, Paul. Councillor
Yeah, I think it.
Sorry, Councillor Inglis?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a problem, that, Paul, you know, and there's question marks around the causeway and how that's impacting on the harbour. Yeah, I just, the feedback I'm getting seems to be that we don't dredge it enough, you know. So, but listen, are we engaging with the harbour users to discuss these proposals, or are these just proposals that have come to the Harbour Subcommittee?
Paul?
All I'd say is we're dredging because we are fighting nature. There is longshore drift there, which causes the harbour entrance to silt up on a regular basis. That's perpetuated by the storms, which is why we have to dredge after storms. So really, this is quite a big strategic decision, is how much money, effort, and how much fighting of nature do you want to do? If we judged it every year at immense cost, and we're already far exceeding the income for that direct harbour for the benefit of those users. So that's why I've put it to you as a strategic decision about exactly how you want to spend the money within the Harbour Service, and is it being spent wisely? That's all.
A question for me on that would be, would groins help the longshore drift?
I am not a longshore geologist, I'm a harbour master. So all I can say is I can apply to get a dredging licence and do the dredging. That all costs money. I don't know what would stop longshore drift. I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that.
Councillor Ingles, then I'm going to Councillor Bray. Councillor Ingles.
Yeah, one of the suggestions that's been made, and again, this is not by fishermen, just to be clear. It's a guy that used to be on the inshore rescue boats, who is no longer on them as far as I'm aware. But one of the suggestions he said was that the causeway wasn't long enough, Paul. And as a result, a lot of the stuff coming round on that drifts, being deposited either in or on the mouth of the harbour. And I just wondered whether, I'm not an engineer, but I'm wondering whether extending that causeway would help the harbour from the point of view of silting up. I know it would be a major operation, Paul, I understand that, but maybe in the long term it's something that we should be considering if the impact of that would alleviate the hassle that we've got with this dredging in the harbour so often.
I've got Karen Brownlee looking to come in.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to touch on a point that Councillor Ingles raised, just in terms of communication and discussions that I've had or been had with the harbour users. So I think we are very aware of the discussions that have taken place, certainly over the last 5 months, in relation to the dredging of the harbour. And also particularly in Port William, but also other issues that have come up through harbour users and in particular some of the commercial fleets. So I just wanted to provide members with the confidence that through Stuart and Paul, they're in the process of developing those regular sort of harbour user groups. So these types of discussions can be discussed. As we said earlier, we can lay out the costs associated with doing work such as this, but also maybe the waste issue as well. So whilst there perhaps haven't been direct discussions at this current time, I think going forward, for me, it's critical that does happen, and we have that two-way discussion, and members have that assurance that those discussions have taken place face to face within the communities with all users, not just commercial users. So just wanted to highlight that just in terms of the communication element. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Can I bring in Councillor Bray?
Thank you, Chair. Right, Paul, from what I see here in the three options, to me, option B would more likely be the best one. And I know that, as you've said, you can't predict what the winter storms are, nor can you predict what the Gulf Stream is going to do to the flow in that part of the world. Yeah, the smell was one of the things that you went down to Port William for, because it was an entirely different, it's sea vegetation, it's just breaking down. So I don't think anyone can actually do anything about that unless you actually pour DTT into the water or something. I wouldn't recommend that. So I'm quite happy, Chair, with option B.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bray. Councillor Ingles again.
Yeah, whatever decision is taken here, Chair, can we caveat it with the decision can be reviewed following that consultation with harbour users, if that's possible. Harbour users and the villages, the community councils and stuff like that, so that we're engaging them, with the maintenance of their harbours. Whatever decision, I would agree with Councillor Brett. I think B is probably the most sensible at the minute, but I think we need to caveat that just to say we're going to have a conversation with the public. Thanks. Yeah.
On that, I'll come back to Karen. Do we have the timing for that, to incorporate that consultation into our decision? Because this needs to be firmed up by November, am I correct?
Through yourself, Chair. So I'll maybe pass it to Stuart. I know Stuart's been specifically looking at this. I'm not aware that we've got anything in the diary at this moment in time, but my suggestion would be that as Councillor Ingalls has suggested, that is the recommendation, but there's a caveat. I wouldn't call it consultation. I would probably call it more engagement and that two-way conversation that actually, if we do decide to dredge, the harbour, for instance, more often, then, this is going to be the impact, or what are the mitigations around that. So for me, it's a two-way conversation. I will pass to Stuart, but I think, we could potentially have those discussions, those harbour groups set up, and this isn't just only Port William, it'll be wider than that, and we can report back to the next harbour sub in November. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have been tasked with setting up a working groups for each of the harbours so we can talk to the community, look at the harbour users, both leisure and commercial. At the moment, I'm trying to work through a kind of framework to put into place for these meetings, so there's a bit of structure to them. So I would hoping that I can actually start to diarise some meetings with the users towards the middle of July, middle of August, and have the conversations with each of the groups at each of the harbours, the 5 harbours that we've got there.
Thanks for that, Sean. Councillor Dashmore.
Yeah, just to back up previous comments about option B, I think that's the most balanced, particularly given that option C, it says it's 4,000 more expensive annually, and the harbour service is already running at a deficit. So option B, I think, is best, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Councillor Dashmore. Councillor Ingalls.
Yeah, sorry, just to come back on the comments around the meetings. I would like it not to only be harbour users that are involved in those meetings. Community council would be, and if they've got a trust, if the villages have got a trust, perhaps they could be involved as well, so that we can lay out the actual problems that we've got to everybody, and get their input and get some discussion going about how we're going to address the issues on these harbours.
I had nodding from Stuart, but I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, Councillor Ingalls. Yet the community councils and also the trusts that are involved within the harbours will definitely be at the table. They will be getting invites to these meetings as well. Sorry, apologies, I should have made that clear.
No, that's brilliant, Stuart. Appreciate that. It would be interesting as an elected member for the ward to be able to come down to that. So I'm sure we'll get an invite to it.
So, members, on part 2, the dredging to budget for the harbour, we've got option B is what we've agreed, and then going on to part 3 of this, quayside use, storage and maintenance. I see that there's multiple recommendations here, Paul. Just to confirm, are we choosing one or are we choosing a selection here of what we would like?
Please feel free to choose whichever you think would be most suitable for the operating of the harbour for the benefit of the users and the wider community.
I'm happy to take the 4 recommendations that are there, which is B, C, E and F, sorry, but I'll ask the other members what their opinions are. Councillor Bray.
Quite happy to go with the Chair's recommendations, what he said, with the recommended options.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor Ingalls, it's in your ward. Have you got any?
Chair, I'm sorry I'm driving now, so I'm struggling to be any useful part right from now on, I'm afraid.
Not a problem. Any other members?
I'll leave it in your capable hands, Chair.
Thank you. So, members, I think without anyone else adding to the conversation, Councillor Bray and I are happy to push that we go with the recommendations as presented to us. Oh, Councillor Dashmore.
Just for clarity, Chair, on E, unauthorised storage charged at the current schedule of fees and charges rate. So if we're charging storage for being unauthorised and we've got a formal charge for this storage, is that not authorising it in a sense rather than removing it?
Sorry, Councillor Dashbert, the unauthorised storage rate is when someone just dumps something on a harbour without any consultation with the harbour staff, and to the detriment of all other harbour users. That's what the unauthorised rate is.
Yeah, I suppose, but rather than removing it, we're charging them for it. Is there, yeah.
No, we would tell them to remove it. If they then don't remove it, we would charge them at the unauthorised rate.
Thanks for that, Paul. So we're happy to go forward with those recommendations? Yes? Not a problem. Now on to the Isle of Whitehorn, which is Appendix 6. I'll give Paul the opportunity to give us a brief description of this one.
And that's a similar set of recommendations to the storage use at Port William, with the exception of a recommendation for how we allocate the berthing of vessels along the quayside adjacent to the road. This is specifically to try and tidy up that area and to make it safer for both road users, pedestrians and the vessel owners, because it's quite a congested part of the village.
Thanks for that, Paul. Members, have we got any information? Councillor Bray.
You're almost going to say Tony there. Point E, Chair. The waste compound introduced to prevent non-harbour users accessing bins allocated for harbour users. Now, I'll assume that we're going to be going down later and we're going to have a look at this. I can't imagine that it would have been a big problem, but is this something that is cyclic with season in particular?
Paul?
Yes, there is greater pressure on waste services in the village during the summer season, probably mostly attributed to the motorhome fraternity and greater visitor numbers, not specifically a harbour issue. And it's not recommended, I haven't put a recommended next to E because siting a compound at the Isle of Whitehorn is actually quite tricky. I'm not sure we have the land space to do it. We'd have to be quite inventive there. Most of the harbour land is too exposed to put a waste compound on.
Councillor Bray.
Given what you've just said there, Paul, would it be useful to go with the recommendations as you have put down there, but leave E open so that we can go down there and see ourselves and then have that discussion down there whilst we're actually there? And although I know the harbour relatively well, but I would like to know your opinion when we're actually down there.
I'm going to just cut across you here, Paul, because William Heaps is looking to come in. I think he might be wanting to address a question here from Councillor Bray, and then I'll bring in Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, I won't particularly support recommendation, or rather, I'm not an officer, not a councillor. However, I would draw your attention to the fact it has been mentioned in previous audits that that area along where the road goes alongside the quay is one that really does need to be tidied up and made safer, and you have a duty of care to both harbour users and the public in that area.
Thanks for that, William. Paul?
Coming back to Counterparty's point of view, yes, the whole point we encourage the Harbour Subcommittee to all the harbours is to maintain good familiarity with the harbours and the operating environment so you can make these key decisions.
Councillor Bright.
Given having said that and what I've just heard online, would it be possible then to say put in E with recommended, but with the proviso that we look at it and you present the Harbours Committee with a potential solution once we've seen it today?
I'm happy to go with that. Our officers happy to take that forward.
We can run with whatever recommendations you would like to suggest to us. That we can implement any of these. So I'm at your disposal to implement anything you would like to go.
That's fantastic. So we're happy with that, Councillor Brett. I'm happy to go with that. Any other members otherwise minded? I'm not seeing anything. So members, moving on to Gartliston in Appendix 7. Paul, would you like to give a wee brief on this one?
Garliston, again, similar recommendations to Isle of Whitmore and Port William with general quayside use. There is one specific area which is it's where people generally park their cars and we occasionally store boats, which is on the most inner wall quayside adjacent to the slipway. The aim here is to manage that a bit more in a bit more beneficial manner to the wider community and the users there, rather than it's previously been a bit of a dumping ground. But also the land ownership there is quite complex with a developer. So we have approximately control of half of that area, and it's to manage that half, which is in a very strange shape due to it used to be a railway sidings, which we don't own, and to look at that and manage it a bit better for the benefit of the wider community, essentially.
That's Paul. Do I have it? Councillor Bray.
Deja vu. Can we have a recommendation and again look at that with options? I've understood that it is extremely complex because normally when you go down to Garliston, there isn't a line that says this is owned by, and then you step over it and then you find yourself in East Berlin or West Berlin. So it would be interesting to have maybe a map of that location with some of these issues so that the members of the committee could actually see printed what the problem actually is. But if that requires a visit to the Garliston Harbour, couldn't we just stop there before we get down to Whithorn?
Yes, there's no reason why we can't do that. And it's on the council mapping, the harbour area. It's very clear, so I can easily get a printout of that for you.
Going back to East Berlin, Councillor Bray, are you happy with that?
Yes.
That
yes,
is good.
That was both in Russian and English.
Right. So are we happy with the recommendations, and we're putting the same kind of discussion on part D, which is the waste compound? Is that what I heard there, Councillor Bray? Councillor Dashper.
Just a question about the parking. So when the council does DPE and we take parking under our own control, is that enforceable through those powers, or are there separate rules around harbour parking or such? Thanks.
I'm not sure if this would come under that, but we'll ask Paul.
It's harbour land, so the harbour service would manage the way that land is managed.
Karen's on the screen, but I think it'll be what the process we are going through is for public roads and public car parks. Well, public roads, sorry, the car parks are separate. And that the harbour, because it's out with the public roads realm or public roads network, it's not going to be covered by that. But I'll bring Karen
in. Thank you, Chair, and through yourself. What you've just explained there is my understanding, but happy to seek further advice from colleagues within the road service who are leading on DPE. My understanding is, and as Paul said, that area that we're talking about is within the harbour's boundary, so it would be for the harbours to manage. Thank you.
Oh, Laura, have you got anything to add to this one?
Thank you, Chair, through yourself. My understanding is that the DPE will cover areas where we've got a traffic regulation order. So unless the car park is included within the traffic regulation order, it wouldn't be covered by DPE.
Thanks for that, Laura. So, members, back to our recommendations. Have we got any thoughts? Anyone going against Councillor Bretty's option and my second? Right, not a problem. I've got nobody on the screen or in the room. So moving on, members, to Appendix 8, which is Kirkcudbright's strategic options. I'll pass over to West Berlin. Paul, would you like to give us a briefing?
Again, these Kakubra is very stable the way it's managed, with no particular issues there. We'd already resolved the waste. Waste was already an issue there because the volume that was being landed, and so that's already been under control. So we don't have a waste issue at Kakubra because that's haven't had to be managed due to the volume of the waste coming in from the scallop dredging fleet. Again, it's just the general principles there. The only real new one there is point F, which we traditionally haven't done but can do, and it would ease the budget.
Councillor Bray.
Yes, right. Well, I won't introduce the fact that C will have it as recommendation. I'll leave the recommendations and agree with the recommendations minus C, Chair.
I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. Councillor Dashboard, or do you want to bring the wall down, or is there anything else?
I'm happy with the recommendations, Chair.
That's that. I'm happy with that. Then members, are members online content with us going with the recommendations on that one? I'm seeing no one coming back in.
Happy with that, Chair.
Thank you. And I have a final appendix, but I don't know if that's got any recommendations. No, it doesn't have any recommendations in it. That's a Marico one. So that's us going through our recommendations in the sense of what we had in our appendixes. So members, if we've got nothing to add to the meeting, I'll go to the general recommendations now, which our members are asked to agree. One, note the contents of the audit and agree to receive updates on progress of actions detailed within Appendix 2, with a monthly report, and at future meetings of this subcommittee as detailed in 4.4. 2, agree to receive an update on the Port Marine Safety Code audit conducted on the 16th to 17th of April 2025 by the designated person, William Heaps. And 3, agree the strategy options for the operation of each harbour as detailed in paragraph 4.9 based on the proposals presented in the appendices 4 to 8. Are we happy to note 1 and agree 2 and 3? I have nods in the room and I've got no one online. So members, moving on to item 6. Any other business deemed urgent by the Chair due for the need for a decision? I have no urgent items of business for the meeting, so that's the meeting come to a close. Thank you for your attendance and thank you for bearing with the voice. Thank you, Chair. Cheers. I hope it doesn't sound terrible on the audio, Abby.